So welcome back, everyone. My name is Anna Gargarian, and I am the head of AGBU Exhibitions. We are going to start our first panel of the day called Globalization, Emerging Markets and Shifting Trends. Maybe I don't need to introduce our speakers since you've heard from them all today, but just quickly, we have Natalia Kochan, who's the founder of Currency.com, Chouchane Dourian, who's a contributor at Coutau-Bégarie and Associates Auction House, and Eva Khatchatryan from the Armenia Art Fair, and also an independent curator. So I want to begin just by putting us all on the same page of what exactly we mean by globalization, because it is one of these buzzwords that has been overused. But I have to use it because since the 1970s, we really have seen an increase in globalization, and that has shaped the world economy forever, not just the art economy. By globalization, I mean specifically the move towards one integrated market. So that's the global flow of capital or money, of trade, so objects, investments, and also people. Economists have identified that certain conditions have enabled this economy and this sort of free flow of information, and that's political openness and a decrease in trade barriers, technology, which has sped up and made more available communication and transportation, as well as a general rise in democracy and sort of global peace. So that's sort of very connected to human rights and tolerance and the role of the press and sort of this sort of free flow of creativity. So we're going to be addressing some of these different factors, but within the art market context. So I'd like us to begin with technology, and particularly information transmission. And my first question, maybe this is an obvious one, it is for you, Natalia. So what are my question is around the tools that are changing the way we communicate. You gave us a good insight in how that's shaped your work. But I thought within the globalization context, if you could tell us also about the production side of it. So who are the developers that you're working with, and how is that different today?
It's on, okay. So you mean like the tech developers that we worked to create our site? Yeah, developers are definitely global. They're everywhere, and I've heard that actually Armenia has some really great tech developers, which is awesome because everything is moving towards tech and all the different languages of tech. So whether you know Java or Python or HTML, CSS, JavaScript, there's all these different languages. And also it tends to be that different countries have different more popular languages. The languages of tech are changing every day, so it's sometimes hard to keep up. But when we started, it was in 2014. We were trying to find developers. I live in Los Angeles County, which is not that far from San Francisco, which is the tech center probably of the world. I think that's where all the big tech companies are. And the developers in San Francisco are from all over the world. They're brought in from especially Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, also a lot of Chinese developers, a lot of Indian developers. And because development as a job in San Francisco, it costs a lot of money to pay a developer there. They tend to earn at least $150,000, if not more. And if you're really good, you're earning a lot of money. So for a new startup, it's almost impossible to afford developers in the US, so people tend to go abroad. We didn't plan to do that at all. We wanted to work with people in LA because it's much easier to work together if you're in the same time zone, the same room. But as a small company with limited resources, we couldn't find anyone in LA that would work for us because we couldn't pay them that much money. So we ended up going to Lviv, Ukraine, which is where my dad is from, and I had been there before. I was really surprised when everyone told me that I should go there because when I was there in 2006, there was no internet, only like a few internet cafes. Less than 10 years later, it's a total tech center. Lviv is filled with developers. We literally went into bars and asked people, are there any developers here? And like all these guys would raise their hands. And so then that's how we found our first team. It was just spoke at a startup club of developers. We said, we have a project, we have money to pay you, and we paid really well for Ukrainian standards. So it was, they were very happy to work for us, and they built the first version of our site.
I'm curious though, you did feel like you had to go there in order to connect with developers, because it sort of
Yes.
feels like a contradiction to a certain extent.
So a lot of people do find developers on internet platforms. So I think there's, I can't remember the name of the big one that everyone uses. Upwork, exactly. Yeah, so we have found developers on Upwork before, and then we have a Skype meeting, we talk to them. You can actually tell the vibe pretty quickly if you can work well together. But when we first started, we were very idealistic, and we thought we would find like a co-founder. We wanted to have a Ukrainian co-founder that would come onto the team and be part of our project. We realized through working with our developers in Ukraine that they weren't actually interested in really being a part of our project. They just wanted to work and to earn money. So once we learned that, it kind of changed how we were thinking about it, because you need to have somebody that is very passionate about the project, which in our case is the arts, which to find a developer who's passionate about the arts is not that easy, because the brain is different. They're working in tech and coding. They're not that interested in painting. Some of them are, but it's difficult to find. So yeah, we felt we had to go there. I recommend if you want to work internationally with developers that you meet them in person. That's just my personal way to do it. But actually now our team, the people we're working with now are American, and we haven't met them. So it works both ways.
I think this is an interesting prospect for Armenia, because we do have a developing tech sector, and I think a lot of people are interested in seeing how they can be a part of global projects.
Yeah.
So what would be your advice for the other way around? So if you have, let's say, a developer here who's interested in seeing kind of what's out there.
Upwork is a great place to start, to just put your what languages you're working on, what kind of work you're looking for. There are tons of people that are trying to make startups in the US. They pay pretty well for different currencies around the world, and I think the main thing is you have to put your work on GitHub and show examples of what you can do. And also my advice is just be really honest about what you can do for development. Usually you can learn stuff, and the people that are hiring you know that you can learn. So just show that you are eager and you're willing to put in a little bit of time to develop for what the project needs, and you could potentially become part of the team. A lot of people, their goal is actually to have you be part of their team. But I think that the idea of, like, the end result is you might have to then move to the US though, right, to work in the thing. But not necessarily. I met the guy sitting next to me on the plane. He was Russian, working for Intel, and he lives in Moscow, and he goes to Claremont in California twice a year. So this is always happening. And yeah, it's definitely 100% possible to work abroad and stay here, but work in American or European companies.
I think this balance between having digital tools that allow us to sort of expand our network and our reach, but also the importance of the meeting point is something that we feel particularly in the art world. And I'd like to direct this question to you, Eva, in terms of, as somebody who has been in the art world, for forever, born into an artistic family, how have you seen the tools these new tools that are surfacing, how has that changed kind of artistic practice and the work of artists?
How you mean when? Like since when? Like maybe I should say.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Maybe in the past, let's say a shift in the past 5 to 10 years. Have you seen any kind of change in how practice is sort of being made?
Yeah, maybe this practice was already different in the beginning of 2000s, I would say. Yeah, when the internet was like already there, and people could get information from all over the world, so you don't need to travel anywhere. I even could say that, for example, in 2004, when I've organized this Media Art Festival, International Media Art Festival. So most of the participants were like international, so about 150 participants, and they just had to send their works to Yerevan. Yeah, I was working at ICAE at that time, and this is how festival took place. So people were sending their works, and festival is there. Yeah, like with full program, interesting films and videos. And the same with local artists. So they participate mostly at international projects abroad, actually much more often than in Armenia, because they have more opportunities to be represented abroad. And most of them, like when we talk about contemporary art, are really internationally known, more than here. So we have this more, let's say, international experience than local one, like on representing artists.
Going back to your sort of art fair hat, can you kind of just explain for the audience the difference between an art fair and, for example, an art biennale?
Yeah, the format is totally different. So in case of art fair, your aim is just to sell the work, yeah? But forums as it is, like maybe we could say that like Biennale is a format that's now happening like in all cities maybe in the world, yeah, even small ones, yeah. So this became kind of tendency that each city is opening its Biennale, and art fair is, I think, is something like more difficult to organize, yeah, especially if this market is not really established in the city. So I mean, the tasks and obstacles are much bigger than in case of Biennale, which is like, okay, big format exhibition, but you can make fundraising, you can get support, and in the end you can achieve the goals you really have, yeah? But in case of art fair, it's more risky. That's why, I mean, this is the difference, let's say, maybe this risk moment.
And I mean, a key distinction there is the commercial aspect, right? That the art fair is much more commercial, and the Biennale is more of a kind of urban experience. Can you explain how that sort of shapes the kind of art that we see on that platform?
Which platform you
Between
mean?
the Biennale and the art fair.
Yeah, okay. My first experience like of Biennale was like 2003. It was Venice Biennale, and then in 2004 I have visited, for example, like Art Forum in Berlin. Yeah, and for me it was of course obvious that here we have just products at art fair. So I didn't have this feeling of seeing art, yeah? So it was really difficult to enjoy what you see because the way it was exposed and exhibited and the way you look at this, everything is organized in a way that this is product, you have to buy it. So this was the main difference, yeah, between Biennale and art form. And Biennale was just more enjoyable, like exhibition spaces, like in different locations that you just visit and you enjoy, more about enjoying. And here, a bit stress in the sense that, okay, yeah, it's more about, this commercial thing is quite obvious, yeah?
Sure. And because we've been seeing so many more art fairs and more biennales in the world, on one hand you're seeing a lot more diverse artists participating, but I also can't help but feel that it's almost as if you have this format that's sort of replicating, and it's almost as if the differences are to a certain extent homogenized. I don't know if you had the same, I just wanted to know your thoughts on that comment, if you think that art fairs are actually diversifying what we're seeing, or if they're sort of homogenizing the field?
I wouldn't say so, because it depends on how you organize it, yeah? Again, because during the presentation I wanted to stress it out somehow that it's always important, like in what context you are doing this, yeah? So you have to take into consideration like the context, first of all. So it means that it can't be the same like in Berlin or Art Basel, so it's something totally different. And even as I told you like before, that the main goal is like to sell and to buy. Anyway, you have to take into account that people don't know anything about this, and you have to teach them somehow, the audience and buyers also, like how to visit and what to look on, etc., etc., etc. So it's still in a process. So I don't know when it will come to its like really commercial point that people really get that, okay, we come here just to buy art, not just to look at. then we will say, okay. But now we are still on the way to this, yeah? And homogenizing, again, I don't afraid of this really, because yeah, I mean, there were maybe these discussions that you make art field like more commercial, yeah? I don't agree with this, because I don't think we have to make this differentiation like commercial art and non-commercial art. You can sell everything. Like I had experience to sell, for example, video art. It happened like really by accident. I didn't have this in my, as a thought, but it happened. So, and what we need to achieve also that not only paintings could be sold out in the future, but also printings, photographs, and videos, why not? So it depends on what kind of people we invite also, of course, to the art fair. Yeah, this could be international collectors, maybe representatives of the museums, who knows, who wants to fulfill their collections, for example, with works from the region, and then they could be these potential buyers. Also for contemporary art, like based on new media.
I'd like to shift now to more the buyer side, and this is actually a question for you, Chouchane. You mentioned that there are very specific rules to the game within the auction world. My question is kind of more of a, what would be your suggestion to new buyers or new collectors who are interested in being a part of this world, but maybe who are a little bit intimidated, they don't know the rules of the game? What would be your suggestion to sort of slowly bring them into this world?
Well, all the people who participate to the auction sales generally know the game. If you want me to speak about the different buyer, first of all, we have the professional who come to the sale room to buy in the aim of resell to particulars. Specifically during jewels auction sales. After we have collectioners, and the third one merchant collectioners, and the other one I don't remember, matchmakers, intermediaries who come to buy for people who cannot be present during the sale, and, like brokers.
And do you have auction previews or these types
No.
of events? You don't have previews?
Exhibitions we have one day before the auction, of course. It's open for people who want to come and see what we will sell the day after.
And so do you have a strategy for reaching new buyers and new clients? How do you really bring people in?
No strategy specifically, because the people who used to come to the auction sales know exactly the game's rule, know exactly how does it work. So it's always the same thing. The exhibitions 2 days before, the catalog online in the internet, and that's all.
Do you provide also any kind of sort of consulting or services to your potential buyers to kind of educate them?
The only thing that we keep doing at every auction, like we know generally who are the buyers specific. Like if we know who are the big collectioners for Art Russian, we contact them one week before the auction sale to send them the catalog and to show them what we will sell during the auction sale to keep them in our customers.
Sure. And maybe, Natalia, I'd like your input on the relationship between the internet and its potential for reaching new buyers and a kind of a new buyer market.
Yeah, actually most art sales I think right now in the US are happening from Instagram. So that's an interesting thing to think about, is that artists are posting their work on Instagram, people are following them, they see the image, they like it. I've seen artists also do auctions very quickly on Instagram, starting price $100 or something for a piece, and then people start saying, I'll pay higher, 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 and then final time, and then they sell it. So that's happening on Instagram every day. On our site, we've had, I think about a dozen things have been bought. The highest one, I think, was like a $1,500 painting. So our work is more digital, but we had an artist from Ukraine that a German buyer saw and thought it was awesome. It was kind of a revolutionary artwork during the time of a few years ago, and she bought it as soon as she saw it. So yeah, it's happening every day on the internet. And actually, that is how artists in the US are getting gallery shows. You don't get a gallery show anymore unless you have a big Instagram following, which is, I don't think it's necessarily right, but the galleries need to make money. They need to make sure that people are going to come to the show. And if you have a lot of fans, a lot of supporters that will come and potentially buy, then you're going to get the show over somebody who maybe their art is more interesting. I don't know, but it's literally just what's popular on the internet. That's what's coming into the galleries and museums too. So it's kind of weird, but
yeah, it's interesting. I think the statistic was that last year 8% of global art sales were made online, which is not a huge number. And most of those sales tend to be works under $5,000. So they've found that things that work well online are things that are relatively low cost,
yes,
because you don't necessarily have to go and see the work in person in order to make the sale.
Yes.
And that sort of contributes to why there's such a, the big high price sales tend to be the sort of in-person, face-to-face meetings.
Yes, and to clarify with the Instagram sales, I'm talking like sometimes even $10 sales, like $15. These are small drawings, and that's happening every day. The big high price, like kind of fine art of several $1,000s, I don't think is necessarily happening on Instagram. But and I don't know if the statistics are of those smaller things are actually even reflected in that 8%, right? Because people are doing also commissions. They're hiring artists like who they like their style to draw pictures of their friends as superheroes and things like that. So that's a much like lower, not kind of, it's not going to be in a gallery, but like especially the kind of Comic-Con is hugely popular, which has a lot of issues because of copyright infringement, but basically that's fan art. Fan art is like one of the biggest selling things of art, which is fascinating because it's completely illegal, but nobody seems to care because they're also doing advertising for these properties. So what I'm talking about fan art is like superheroes, movies, like artists that are drawing these properties that they don't own the rights to, and people are buying that every day, which it is some kind of art market. It's just that it's technically illegal, but
I think that brings up an interesting kind of perspective on when we're talking about general consensus, because the art market is very much about establishing, that's sort of how credibility is built around an artwork or an artist, and I think we're seeing this kind of a split where you have the public consensus, which is happening very much in the online platforms, but then you have sort of a scholarly consensus. And this brings me to my next question, which is very much about the relationship to place, because even though we are in this globalized context, there still seems to be certain cities that have the power to endorse certain types of, to endorse artists in a different way. There still is the kind of an importance for artists to be exhibiting in Berlin or in Shanghai or in Paris. So this is kind of an open question to all of you. What are your thoughts on this relationship between the importance of actual location and within this sort of constantly flowing globalized context?
Should I start, or?
If you want.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. In the US, it's LA, San Francisco, New York, and I guess maybe Chicago too, but not really. No, we don't hear about it. It's pretty much LA, New York, San Francisco. And what I've found is that the most interesting art that I've seen is actually coming from very small towns in rural America. And these artists have zero opportunities, but they're getting very popular on the internet. So I think there's starting to be kind of a backlash against this idea of place, also because rents in San Francisco are insane, so artists can't afford to live there. Same with New York, same with LA. So the artists are moving to, I think, Asheville, North Carolina. Austin, Texas is already too expensive. Nashville, too expensive. Like basically any major city in the US is now becoming kind of a minor art center because the artists are moving to these smaller cities to try to have some opportunities. But yeah, I don't know. I think the internet kind of frees people from that, but I think in the higher art market, the non-internet art market, it is very important if you're exhibited in these bigger places.
Yeah. And I think that's where the gallery sort of plays an important role, right? Because if you're represented by a gallery, then they have the opportunity to connect you to these global platforms. Maybe Chouchane or Eva, you want to comment on that?
I just thought that maybe as a minus, like for local artists, not all of them are really good represented online. Some of them even decided, I mean, they just refused, for example, to have a website. Some of them have it, of course you can visit and see what they do, but some of them are really leftist from that point of view, yeah? They don't want to even become part of this global market. So, and for them this physical presence is important. So this traveling and going and visiting and participating in some cities. But what about this increasing the career, yeah, of the artist if he's exhibiting in New York or somewhere else. This happening, but again, I don't believe it. I don't believe in this so much, because like in case of Venice Biennale, for example, that most of the artists, Armenian artists, have participated, yeah, because ACCA, when ACCA was responsible for this, so they have managed to represent almost all contemporary artists there. And when you go through biographies, it looks really strange, like people like abroad, yeah, like professionals, okay, you have participated at Venice Biennale, cool. And they think that, okay, then artist is really famous, yeah, but it's not like that. So it's again this, I don't know if I should, this Patahakansun as an accident, should I use this word or not? I don't know, but this is something like very typical to our context. So you never know, like, where you will appear, how, in what circumstances, but sometimes it plays important role in your career, sometimes not. And I think it's typical also to the whole market and international scene too, because I know many really young artists who were successful in the very beginning of their career, participating in all these big forums, then depression starts, yeah? Then after some time they don't know what to do and they don't produce any artwork. So that's why this is something that you have to be really careful as an artist, yeah? When you in this flow.
I think that's kind of an interesting advantage about being in Armenia, is that because we are in such a small country and there's a smaller community, there's also this very kind of rich and quick kind of exchange of ideas, and like you said, you can have, because the artist group is quite small, then they have more opportunity to exhibit on these major platforms as a national representation. So and living costs here are much more affordable. So it's sort of this strange
moving centers. I think this is something that's happening now in the world. Yes, you can't say, of course you can, you know, that New York or Berlin or Paris, these are the centers, yeah? But on the other hand, now it's really moving. So you can do something really important here and all these people will decide, okay, we go to Yerevan, yeah? To participate in this event or to take part in this or to just observe. So, I mean, yeah.
Chouchane, your auction house is in Paris, which has been this sort of historic center for the arts, at least in the first half of the 20th century. So just by being in Paris, this opens many opportunities. But I'm wondering if in the past, at least in your time at Coutau-Bégarie, if you've seen a change in the clientele or the art objects that are surfacing due to these new rises of other kind of artistic centers and other buyers?
No, I didn't see any specific change. I just noticed that the artists that galleries promote during all the year, sometimes we can recognize some items of these artists during in the sales room, during the auction house, during the auction sales, and the cost of these artists during the sales the auction sales keep the cost of these artists promoted by galleries. When you see some items of these galleries, it's like an opportunity for the auction sales to get out of the main lot that we used to sell, like paintings, 19th century, 18th century, jewels, and so on. It's like a door, that is opened to contemporary modern art for auction sales.
And I know this isn't your particular area of expertise, but there are potentially very dangerous repercussions for a contemporary artist to exhibit at auction, right? If you sell at auction, but if you don't sell successfully because it is public, because it is transparent.
We can, there is some reserve price fixed. When the seller when the seller bring us the item, I don't know, case ring, for example, and knowing that his cost is very high, we cannot sell it under a minimum price, so that we can keep his cost higher.
But if it doesn't sell, then you buy
it,
right?
Getting back to the seller.
And then this information becomes public. So this is
No, it doesn't.
You don't publicly share your sales?
Yeah, we share, but it is not written that it not has been sold.
So how does that show up in a public domain?
In the catalog, when you see the catalog of the auction sale, you have the items, the lot with the price. If like a lot is estimated, I don't know, 5,000, 7,000, okay? Education price, if it has been 10,000, it is written in the catalog under the estimation price, 10,000. If it's not sold, nothing is written, just the estimation prices.
I've been thinking a lot about this idea of kind of transparency and how this can be beneficial, but also, you know, in this case, it could sort of harm an artist's career. I was wondering if, Nat, from your perspective, what the role is of internet in relation to transparency.
Transparency meaning?
In sort of making information more accessible and available in a public kind of way.
Yeah, so, sorry, to make sure I understand, you mean like of the costs of the art piece, or of the...
I guess the thing that comes to mind is sort of how blockchain technology is changing the way we, or could potentially change the way we archive information and share it
Definitely.
in an immediate kind of way.
Yeah, so the blockchain stuff and also new technologies for embedding metadata into images, digital images, and also creating digital art pieces and art objects, which are, there's a just beginning market, which there's a site called, I think it's called CryptoKitties. I'm not sure if anybody's seen this site. It's very popular now, and it's these strange little drawings of cats, like kind of comic-looking cats. They're all original digital art pieces, and they have information embedded in some kind of crypto token. So it's a bunch of code, and you can buy them, trade them, sell them for different prices. And so this is kind of it's the most successful of this kind of crypto art right now. People in San Francisco are loving this. I have a friend that is like working for Tinder, and I think he has invested in this. People think this is the greatest future of art. I'm not sure myself, because it is just a digital art piece, and technically people can take screenshots of it, right? So the question is, what is the value of owning a original digital? Because digital is about copies. That's what digital does. It allows you to copy it all around the world. So I'm more on the side of, I think digital copies should be free and able to be sent all about, but we need to change the mindset that looking at those copies is valuable. But there are this idea that people want to create scarcity, because scarcity is what has value. So they're trying to create scarcity on digital objects. I think it's a losing battle, because who cares? Like, it's a cat drawing, I mean, personally. And if you want to look at the cat drawing, you can look at it, but why would you want to own that digital copy? So the question is, I guess, about ownership with this kind of crypto stuff. But for transparency, there's all of this technology about keeping records of who the original artist was, when it was made, the buyers, that can all be kept on these public ledgers. So Paddle 8 is an auction house, I think, in London that's specializing in selling of digital art objects, and they just launched their provenance thing where they put the little tag on the art piece, which means that you can't make a fraud out of that piece ever. Like, it's the original piece, it's on the piece. It's basically like putting a little DNA code on the art piece. So that will keep all the information, what it sold for, who bought it, when, forever. And no one can change it. It's not, you can't change the ledger. So
Can you remove the encoding? Can you remove that chip or that?
I guess you could remove that chip. That would be the only way that then it could be a problem. So, but then if the chip is removed, then people wouldn't believe that it was a real thing. So if you know that that art piece had a chip and the chip is gone, then you assume it's not the real one, right? So for people to maintain the value, they would want to preserve that chip on their piece, I guess.
That's nice. I wasn't aware of that particular auction house. In terms of authentication, maybe I'll pass back to you, Chouchane. You were mentioning earlier about the challenges. Yeah, the challenges of making sure that your works are authentic. Can you walk us through the kind of the process of
Of the process of expertise?
Is it a department within the auction house? Do you collaborate with external authenticators?
Every area in which we are specialized, like Russian art, African art, China's art, jewels, has his own expert we collaborate with. What can I say? Every expert is different. They are just collaborator, not. They do not use to work every day at the office. They come only for the auction sale that we are presenting the day. That's it.
Maybe I'd like to shift the discussion a little bit towards politics, in the sense that. I mean, there is a very direct connection between the political climate and the political environment and sales. So when things are politically more challenging, buyers tend to sort of hold back a bit. So they have found a very kind of direct connection between these two. And this leads me to think, what is the role of the press or really sort of critical platforms for sort of engaging with audiences and making sure that the discussions are happening in an open sort of format. I thought maybe Eva, you could talk about this a little bit, particularly because there's sort of a lack of these types of platforms in Armenia. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the press and written criticism and that's relationship with contemporary art?
Yeah, this is actually a difficult question in the sense that we don't have such platforms. Yeah, of course there are art critics and really good writers, but they don't have really this platform where they could write for this. Yeah, so now again I have to say that in framework of an art fair we want to motivate some writers to write not only just about things happening within an art fair, but this will be kind of stimul, I would say, to develop it somehow. Of course, we have ICAE Armenia here, which from time to time also do kind of open calls for art critics, depending again on fundings, how it can be organized. But it's not really sustainable, I would say, yeah, unfortunately. And discussions happening like, I could say like every day in each point of the city, like of course these gatherings are happening between art critics, curators and artists, but it's all like really like, yeah, it's not written, unfortunately, so we don't see it. Yeah, we know all these influences, etc., but it's really difficult to follow for others, for example. And then when somebody is coming, it's really difficult because you have to explain all this, you know. And that's why it's also difficult to follow these influences, you say, yeah, this political climate, how it could affect the sellings or market in general. So, yeah, we could not, like art fair could not happen, for example, this is what I can say, if we would have different results, like negative ones, for example, yeah, but in general, like as a process, because of absence of these platforms, yeah, it's difficult to analyze.
And this is a particularly, in my opinion, it's a particularly important point, especially because it's so difficult for us as a country that is in an economically sort of challenging place, because it's so expensive to participate at international platforms, biennales or art fairs, that the press could really be our way to get noticed from global audiences. What would be your suggestion of sort of a starting point so that we could start not just cultivating criticism internally, but making sure that we're connecting to global audiences?
Yeah, I mean, for example, we had this kind of collaborations again within the art fair, because it was published like as an event in some magazines abroad, and now we know that more people know about an art fair, yeah? Like mostly in US maybe, not so much in Europe. But I mean, this is what we should do, yeah? Like one of the directions, that to be in touch with all this international also press, not only local one. Local is of course important, like for local audiences, but also to inform international press too on what's happening here. And we don't pay attention so much to this. I mean, if not an art fair, for example, I mean, this could happen like in case of any project which we do here, yeah, and then it's not so obvious for others, not so visible. This is what we have to think about. I mean, only Facebook is not, of course, the only way that we should use. I mean, Facebook is, unfortunately, like all these years, the only platform that make all these things visible.
And I mean, I think now in particular, because of the Velvet Revolution, Armenia is that much more in the public eye as this sort of weird little place that a lot of people didn't know about, but look at this exciting stuff that's happening here. So we really need to sort of take advantage of this momentum. And Nat, I wanted to ask you, what other tools do you think are out there really in order for us to make that connection globally, whether those are online platforms or things that you've come across?
Yeah, so one thing I was just thinking about is street art is a really big deal in the US. There's a lot of these new kind of organizations. One is called Powwow that is, I think it started in Hawaii, and they do it in all the kind of big cities. So they did a powwow Long Beach in my hometown near Los Angeles, and they bring in street artists, I think from all over the world, but it might be mostly US, but there are international ones. And that is a great way to get you know, people to know about an artist, right? Because the name is there. Usually they'll put the Instagram handle or something. People will follow it. You can even put like a QR code on the wall so people can use their phone and then get information about that artist. And these, I don't know if there's funds to get if there's Armenian muralists or something, get a mural in some of the big cities, get a mural in Berlin, get a mural in Kiev, get a mural, you know, it doesn't even have to be in the US, but just around, because travelers always take pictures in front of street art, and then they will tag the artists, and then it starts to, that's just one idea. Another thing is to not forget about the diaspora. I'm part of the Ukrainian diaspora, and I grew up, if anybody asked me like who I am, I would say I'm Ukrainian, and I'm not, clearly. I'm American, but you know, my dad is very strongly Ukrainian. He was a refugee, and it's very important for him to maintain the culture. I grew up going to Ukrainian school, and I know a ton of Ukrainians like me who are not Ukrainian. They're American or Canadian, but they think they're Ukrainian in their mind, right? You grow up with this culture, and they're very proud of it, and they really want to connect with the home country, even though it's not their home country. But that's kind of the mental idea. And I know that in Los Angeles, Glendale, and Fresno, there are huge Armenian populations. I'm sure there are a lot of young Armenians that grew up just like I did in LA, going to Armenian school. I'm sure they want to come here. I'm sure they want to collaborate. But I know that the attitude when I went to Ukraine when I was 20, I was so excited to go there. And I met the Ukrainians, and they all told me I'm not Ukrainian. They laughed at me and said, "You're not Ukrainian. This is ridiculous." And also, the language that I spoke is not spoken in Ukraine. That's the old language, right? This is the language of the refugees. So it's a little bit more Polish. It's not Russified. I'm sure there's a similar thing with Armenian, but those people, the diaspora Ukrainians, they're the ones that are going to the shows of the Ukrainian musicians that are coming to LA. They're buying tickets for the art fairs. They're supporting you. So I think it's just something to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's particularly important for AGBU as an organization that was a diaspora founded organization, and that is very much something that our global diaspora is dedicated to doing, is to creating these connections between Armenian diaspora and locally. I think for the arts, there's this other level of not difficulty, but most of the goal for artists is to make sure that they're being recognized globally and not just by global Armenians, but to sort of get out of that loop.
So, but the cool thing is that in the U.S., you know, when people in the U.S., my name is Natalia, right? So in Long Beach, people ask me, they think I'm Ukrainian, right? The way the Americans think. So I'm a representative of Ukraine in America, which Ukrainians are probably, you know, they're like, you're not Ukrainian, but all of my friends know that I'm Ukrainian. And that's the same with the Armenian diaspora. They're the representatives of Armenia in LA. So they have friends that are not Armenian. I don't have any other, I mean, I have a few Ukrainian American friends, but they're like in New York or Chicago. But in LA, it's just me and my family. We're the Ukrainians. And so we're the ones that are telling everybody, go see Daka Braka, which is a really cool Ukrainian band that's very popular now. And when I went to the show, the Daka Braka show in Anaheim, California, it was all Mexican-American punks. And it was like, how do you guys know about Daka Braka? And they're like, we love Daka Braka, it's the coolest band. And same with Gogol Bordello, and he got big because of, you know, the movie Everything is Illuminated, which was also diaspora Jewish Ukrainian that wrote a book about Ukraine because he was looking at his ancestry. And so they're the ones that are kind of wanting to collaborate, co-create, and then bringing the people to do the show. So we're doing the advertising for you in America, basically. So yeah, and it's not being stuck in just the diaspora community. Daka Braka is loved by everyone, and they're at big festivals now. They're like super popular. I don't know what happened there. They're like going really big. So yeah,
we have probably similar equivalent if you think of System of a Down.
Oh yeah, like I love System of a Down. yeah, we listen to System of a Down all the time. My brother's a huge System of a Down fan. They're LA Armenians, right? Yeah, and there's so many people like Alexis Ohanian is the founder of Reddit. He's married to Serena Williams. He was at the royal wedding. He's Armenian, right? It's like he's investing in all the tech companies. He invested in my brother's company. So when I get home, I'm going to see if I can talk to him and see, is he investing in Armenia? Does he know that there's all this tech stuff? I'm sure he does, but who knows what he's doing, right? So yeah, there's opportunities everywhere. But
thank you. Chouchane, do you have any comments about that as someone from the diaspora yourself?
No, just for the media, I think, like in Paris for the auction sale, we have a specific media in the magazine, which is called La Gazette Drou. Maybe for Armenia, except Facebook, we can create some media magazine, collaborate with bloggers to generalize this phenomenon, which is art market in Armenia, maybe.
Great, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Maybe do you have any last comments, things that you'd like to share before we sort of open it up to the audience?
Sorry. One thing I've noticed as I was walking around, I did a lot of sightseeing because I was super excited to be here, so I spent my first few days just going everywhere. And I ran into actually quite a few Americans, not Armenian Americans, like Italian Americans, just random Americans. And they were photographers and artists, and one guy, he moved here, he's living here, and he's like, I love Armenia, and he was saying that, and this reminded me when you were saying that Berlin is one of the art centers. I was in Berlin 10 years ago. It was just kind of becoming where all the artists were moving there. The reason they were moving there is because the rent was cheap. That's why. And he told me that he likes living here because he can afford the rent and he can take his photos, and he took all photos of the Velvet Revolution. He's really excited. He's from Ohio. And I think that there's huge opportunity of bringing in artists from all over the world here to just have them be here, have them be painting, just living here, just doing stuff. Also, there's a lot of hostels around, I noticed, and a lot of young people, they travel, they stay in hostels. You could create art tours at the hostels, like just have a tour, get a young college student volunteer. I went all around staying in hostels all over the world. It's all young people, they're just staying in these places, and they want to have local guides. It's a fun way to make friends, a fun way to connect. A lot of the people are taking photos, they're artists too, so just a few ideas.
Super, thanks. I think you're like our best ambassador in California now.
I really like it here, so I'll tell everybody to come.
So I'd like to open up questions from the audience, if there are any. Please don't be shy. No?
Thanks for the discussion. I guess my question is mostly for Natalia, but for everyone else as well. We were talking about digital art and that it has value and we need to recognize it. But what about digital curating and creating collections and choosing from this vast amount of artworks out there, which is insane to go through everything for a single person. So maybe we should create value for people who choose and pick and curate these digital collections. Is it possible or not?
Definitely possible. That is actually what my platform is about. It's called Curancy because of curation, right? Curated C, that's what it stands for. So that is on my platform, if you curate works, you get 10% of the tips when people tip what you share. And the reason is because it's a lot of work to go through all of those images and find the good stuff. And so on our site, we also have in our search, it's divided between a regular explorer, and those are pieces that have already been tipped a few times, so that only like the better, not better, or more popular pieces are gonna show up in the original search. And then there's a place called The Great Unknown on our site, and that's for pieces that have just been posted, so that means they're either undiscovered, or maybe nobody likes them. So there's two options. But mostly it's because just people haven't seen it yet, a curator hasn't pulled it out of the great unknown. And so that is kind of dividing because there are two types of people, I think. There are people that just want to see stuff fed to them, and then there are people that like to search for it and like to find the good stuff. So yeah, 100% the curation is incredibly important. Also, there's a thing called Tastemaker online, right? That's Instagram. People are they're having jobs doing this, right? As being a tastemaker. It's getting harder and harder to become a tastemaker because now there's so many people on Instagram, but at the beginning,
you need to choose between
you have to be a tastemaker. Yeah, pick all the good tastemakers and tell people which one to follow. So yeah, that is going to be, I think, a growing job as more and more of the visual culture and writing, also music, all of this, we need people to tell us why this stuff is cool. That's also, I think we were talking yesterday about explaining the artworks and writing why this is cool, because people don't necessarily know, once they hear it from a different perspective, they appreciate the artwork so much more, right? So some people have a skill for explaining why this piece of digital art is so interesting, and then everybody's like, oh wow, I didn't realize that was made completely on a computer. I thought that was a photograph, and so they didn't even appreciate it because they didn't realize that that was completely created by an artist. So tastemakers, curators, incredibly important. They should be compensated. We're working on it.
Maybe we should invite more of those people to Armenia, and they will.
Yeah, actually, that would be really a cool idea. I'm sure that they would be delighted to come here to look for artists. There are a lot of young people that want to do that, so that's a great idea, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion. My question is also to Natalia. You said that when the artist gets enough tips, he can be paid by PayPal.
Yes.
So in Armenia, as far as I know, there is still a problem with PayPal because it is not connected to our bank account, so we can't we can't get the money.
You can't cash it
so
out.
that's why this can be a problem if you want Armenian artists to register on your platform. So is there another opportunity to get the money with other?
Yeah, so this has been, because our goal is to have a global platform. We want to have people from all over the world. We've encountered this also with Ukraine, same problem. You can get the money in PayPal, but you can't cash it out to your bank. I think it was changed that in Ukraine you now can. I'm not sure if it has changed yet in Armenia. It probably will. PayPal's working on it, which is great because they're a much bigger company than us. And there's also a lot more new payment options too. I know there's Payoneer, there's Venmo, I don't think it's here, but there's different ways to get money. The problem for us as a company is that because we are just a small company at the moment, hopefully we'll grow. Once we do, we will definitely be working on making sure that payments are able to go to every country, because that's our goal. But the reason for right now that we only have PayPal is just for our own protection, because PayPal handles identity and just making sure that we're not sending money to the wrong people. They handle the tax stuff, because otherwise we would have to become experts in every single international country's tax law, and that's a lot for just me and Sophie, my co-founder. So.
You mentioned Amazon a bit earlier, and we have in Armenia, we don't have, Amazon doesn't deliver to Armenia, but we have a sort of intermediary company which is called Globing, so that basically you can order on Amazon, it delivers to one of two addresses, whether it's the UK or the US, and then Globing will take it from there to here. So I'm wondering if there's an intermediary, sort of something that could be between a PayPal and local bank accounts. And I know we have someone in, he's shaking his head no. Yeah.
Because we were actually drilled with this problem, as we have also an online platform, and we exactly have the same problem. There are systems that works not as an intermediary, but they have their own payment system that works with Armenia, but the regulations, everything is just too hard, the person is too hard, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense if you're going to use it.
Yeah. Now, my question about PayPal, can you use PayPal to buy things though? So if you earn money on PayPal, you could still use the money that you earn on currency to buy stuff online.
Yeah.
So it still works to some degree, but it's not working at the full way that you can't cash it out. Yeah. So we're working on that. So, and I'm going to keep it in my mind, because now obviously I've been to Armenia and we want to keep this connection. So we'll make sure that we research that, and maybe you can let me. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting. We have a promo code for anybody that signs up for our site to, it's just AGBU, all capital, I just used AGBU. So when you go to buy coins, you don't have to buy anything, just put in the code where it says promo code AGBU, and you'll get 250 currency coins, which you can give to different artists, so you can get started on the platform paying people. It's money giving to you to pay other artists, so but it's fun. You can see how it works and tip people and get your friends on, give them the coins. Yeah, just give it to people. So, AGBU. Yeah.
We have to break for lunch. One final question? Okay.
Մեկ հարցեր Տիգրան Մաթոսյան, կինոպրոդյուսեր։
Mi varken, spasik.
Այնպես է ստացվում, որ երրորդ հարցն էլ Նատալիային է ուղղվում։ Ես կուզեի լսել նրա կինո գործունեության մասին, քանի որ ես ծանոթացա, նա սովորել է կինոյի բնագավառում, տարբեր ուսումնական հաստատություններում, ինչ գործեր ունի, ինչ է արել։ Շատ հետաքրքիր է։ Շնորհակալություն։
Sure. So the question, if anybody, does everybody understand Armenian? Or it was about my film background. So yeah, I studied screenwriting at USC, which is the University of Southern California. That's kind of the main Hollywood style film school. That's where George Lucas went to school. So it's very much commercial movies. It's Star Wars. Steven Spielberg's, he actually went to Cal State Long Beach, was where I went for undergrad, but he acts like he's a USC guy. So it's all those kind of main big American filmmakers at USC. I wasn't actually that interested in film before I went to USC. I was a poet. It was an accident that I ended up at film school. But then I started, my undergrad was in Chinese studies, so I speak Chinese. My goal was to combine somehow my interests in film and Chinese, so that's where I ended up in China. I studied cinematography at the Beijing Film Academy. I was making kind of short documentaries, and then I write horror movies, which are very popular to be produced because they're cheap to make. So you don't need a lot, you just need like fake fake blood and monsters and stuff. So that's why people like to make horror movies. I had a lot of fears as a child, and I have a lot of nightmares, so I could make good horror movies. And in China, it was a different experience because they do have censorship in China. So there's a lot of things that you can't write about. But I was working on horror movies in China. In China, you have to have a scientific base, at least at the time. It changes all the time with the censorship, so I'm not sure what it is currently, but I was there in 2012, and at the time for horror, you had to have a scientific basis to explain what was going on. It all had to be based in reality. So if you had a monster movie, you had to then show that the monster was actually something in this world. It could not be from a different world, which I tend to like to write about aliens and ghosts, so my stuff is more out of this world, but in China it was in this world. So I worked on a found footage movie about Yetis in Tibet. So it was working with local producers, local director, producer, and I was writing in Chinese, which I'm not sure that I could do that again anymore. It's been a while. But yeah, one of my friends at the Film Academy is a filmmaker here, Vahagan I can't say his name, Khatchatryan. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for this panel. We will break for lunch, and we'll start the next panel about 15 minutes late. So 2:15 here. Please be on time so that we can continue in a timely way. Thank you.